Hello, everybody. Where's my Illinois crew? All right. Well, welcome. We're going to be talking about ancillary today. My name is Lori Parfit, and I am your moderator. I have a company called LKP Impact Consulting. I'm a fractional CMO. I am so excited to be speaking here in my hometown about one of my favorite topics, which is ancillary, which is also where I sit within the cannabis space. I'm excited to introduce our panel. Let's welcome up our panel. Give them a round of applause. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking about the hidden winners in cannabis, profitable businesses without the red tape. And so, as we know, everybody who's joined this industry has always been really big about getting a license, being plant touching, but there is so much more to this industry than just the plant touching side. In fact, when I joined the industry back in 2019, one of my friends at one of the major MSOs said, there's a lot more opportunity than just being part of an MSO or just being part of a plant touching operation. What we really truly need is businesses that can support the industry. And so as an industry, we're very over-infrastructured. In all of our states, we have to have all these manufacturing facilities, cultivation facilities, and retail facilities. We can't move stuff across state lines. On the ancillary side, we've had to build a lot from the bottom up. And so there's a lot of opportunity in this space, and a lot of it sits within the non-plant touching side of the business. So we're going to be talking about this today. I'm going to have all of our panelists introduce themselves. Gary, why don't we start with you?
Sure, thanks, Lori. My name's Gary Santo, CEO of RX Green. We focus on substrates and nutrients, so I spent time on the plant touching side at the Cannabis and at Tilt Holdings, and then thought it would make a lot of sense to get to the front end of this and start figuring out ways to help the industry without just being a plant-touching shop. So it's been pretty eye-opening. I've been there since 2023, and business has been really starting to spike, as we've started to expand.
Wonderful. Jack?
Jack Grover with Grove Bags, predominantly known for our cultivation packaging product, Terplock. So been in over 1,000 grows on 6 continents at this point in my 9+ years in cannabis, and hopefully got some fun insights for you guys today.
John?
And I'm John Mons. I'm the Vice President of Sales for iSpire. We focus on cannabis vape hardware, nicotine vape hardware, and we are basically the global, but yeah, we're a vape hardware company.
Wonderful. Thank you for those amazing introductions. So I'd love to have a little bit of audience participation here. So raise your hand if you are a plant-touching cultivation manufacturing operation. All right. Retail. All right. Ancillary. All right. Lots of ancillary. All right. Thank you for that lay of the land. That helps our panelists really frame up their answers. So we have 3 topics that we're going to be covering today that kind of run the gamut of the ancillary side. So our first topic is the ancillary advantage, why non-plant touching businesses thrive. So as we just said, plant touching businesses have, major regulatory concerns. We have 280E, we have all kinds of things on the plant touching side that kind of inhibit that side of the business. So my first question for our panel is, can you discuss the regulatory burden that plant touching businesses really face, and how it impacts their operations, and how ancillary can avoid some of these challenges? John, let's start with you.
Yeah, so as a plant touching company, I started my space in the plant touching side, and it's tough. You have a lot of regulations that keep you from being able to move forward in an easy way. It's a lot of things that are up against you every day as far as changes in, packaging needs, different things that can, completely change your supply chain and make you need to back up a few. But on our side, we don't have that issue. We also can work in multiple spaces, so we can work in every different kind of regulated market, from like hemp space to the legalized cannabis space in each of the other states, and that gives us a leg up against some of the cannabis plant touching side, where you are really limited to single markets at times, and constantly up against changes in legislation and different things like that that can really make it tough to scale at times.
Yeah, I think to build off what John's saying, I think akin to a gold rush or a green rush, right? I think the ancillary companies have a lot of opportunity to oscillate to the market and to the question, jump in between markets without as much headache and without as much red tape, particularly for us as a packaging provider and a packaging solutions provider. So really the dream for us and a lot of my colleagues in the ancillary space is to be Levi's or to be a ubiquitous value-adding solution that the industry really stand by.
And I think what makes it even more interesting is we can run lean. We can do what the plant touchers cannot do, which is to go into a new market. I don't have to build a complete infrastructure to go to that market. I just need to add a salesperson and just make sure I have delivery channels to get there. So I can centrally locate my manufacturing. I could think about where labor's cheap, where transportation's plentiful. So can really move around like a normal business might. And then without 280E and all the other things, I can use normal payroll and everything. I think the trick there is what is your value proposition ultimately to the end customer, because they do still have to deal with all that. So how you price yourself and what you're able to offer, that's sort of the challenge to an ancillary. But overall, we can do those things that the plant touchers can't.
Right, so let's talk about that. So the pricing issue, you just brought that up, and we were talking about that earlier today. So a lot of what was created for the cannabis space on the ancillary side kind of took a look at the industry and said, we're going to put like that green tax on top of it. And so since we weren't able to use solutions like ADP and Paychex and some of the things that other businesses are able to utilize, everything kind of got homegrown for this industry. And with that, there was sort of a premium to participate. And so let's talk a little bit about that kind of green tax and how we can avoid that going forward. So do you have any thoughts on that, Gary?
Sure. I mean, part of it is, the automatic green tax was unfortunate. Not everything had to be built from scratch. You could emulate other platforms, but then also look at what the value was you were bringing. Because anybody who's an operator would look and say, great, so I'm going to pay up for what was not necessarily the same service. So I'm paying a tax and I'm not getting the same product at the end of the day. And it gave some of those first movers a little bit of a black eye. I think there were opportunities to figure out ways to leverage existing platforms in a different way or mimic them, but then price them in a way that you want to be here for the long haul. If you're a first mover and your decision is, I'm going to live in rented space, I'm going to charge a premium dollar amount, and the second legalization occurs, I'm going to fade to the background, it's a business model. I don't think that's one I'd sign on for. But instead, if you realize slow and steady wins the race, establish yourself, create that sticky relationship, and be fairly priced out of the gates and not just take advantage of gouging pricing, there'll be a place for you. Even on the other end in full legalization, you could get swallowed up by one of the mainstream shops that says, I'm just going to take your business with me, as opposed to recreate it myself. So if you're thoughtful, there's a path.
Jack?
I think that's a great point, Gary. I think there's a vastly different approach from approaching your customers and trying to build a supply chain as a transactional supplier versus really trying to build it up as a relationship-based, important structural relationship where you're really aiding your clients in scaling, and you're aiding your clients in the difficulties of scaling a cannabis business in today's environment. And I think that's a crucial difference between tourists and companies that hope to be enduring fixtures in the space.
Yeah. John, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's definitely tough in that part of the business, but I mean, we find ways around it, and we continue to get through.
Yeah. So ancillary businesses not subject to the same regulation, don't need all of the infrastructure in place, and we need to make sure that we're really thinking about how do we price to make sure that we can meet the market where it's at, because price gouging or doing things that create issues within the plant touching side are not going to be viable going forward. And so we don't need to price gouge our plant touching businesses, because we need to be really that traditional ecosystem that kind of comes together. So we all know that the cannabis industry changes on a monthly, weekly, daily, hourly basis. Preferences change, regulations change. So how can ancillary businesses, really kind of keep up with some of those challenges? And what are some of those challenges that ancillary kind of faces that maybe our plant touching side is not as involved with? Jack, why don't we start with you?
I think critically off the bat, you have to always be aware that it's a very fluid situation. It's not static, and I think a lot of our colleagues in the space and even us at times have gotten caught on the wrong side of changing legislation, changing statutes, for example, really being ahead of the curve. Some states for flexible packaging now require a certain percentage of post-consumer recycled content, and being proactive and trying to build for where the market is going and continually journeying to instead of where it is right now or 20 minutes ago is really can't be understated.
Right, so you always have to kind of keep up with it. You always have to be ready to change. The only thing constant in anything is change. Any thoughts from you, Gary?
I mean, I think you have to put yourself in the position of your customers. We reformed RX Green when I joined in 2023 and took an operator's perspective. Having been on the other end of those sales pitches and those sales calls, understanding the pain points, understanding the issues in front of them, and then keeping that eye on where that market's going to make sure that you're always bringing something to them that's a value add and you're an important, meaningful place in their value chain. I mean, we're very lucky. You always hear about ancillaries. They don't get paid, right? And we all have this problem. If we don't get paid, then we have a problem. I think last year we wrote off $11,000 of bad debt. All of our customers pay. We provide the service. We think around, we look around the corner for them and actually try to help them navigate, at times, almost helping them run their business. I think you bring that kind of partnership, you're going to have a long-term relationship.
I would agree. John, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, well, sitting at the top of the supply chain, I mean, yeah, as things happen, if payments are made, that goes all the way up, and from retail to brands to us, and we're the last ones kind of sitting there at the end. So I agree, that definitely gets tough. And when you look at things like tariffs and changes in how we're bringing in products, that becomes a huge obstacle. So we looked into other factories in other countries outside of China, open ground in Malaysia to make sure that we're combating all those issues, but that's constantly a battle we're dealing with.
Yeah, so that's actually a really good point. So as we know, our federal government has implemented tariffs across the world. And regardless of what you think about that from a political perspective, it does, a lot of people thought that didn't affect the cannabis industry because what's grown in Illinois is sold in Illinois. What's grown in California is sold in California, or it's at least supposed to be. However, the ancillary side of the business, one of the major challenges that we see is a lot of that hardware comes from overseas. Some of those bags come from overseas. And so one of the major challenges that we have on the ancillary side is, even though what's great is we are able to use a lot of those regular supply chains, but those supply chains are now changing in a way that might make it less profitable for our ancillary businesses. All right, so let's move to our second topic, and this is really more about innovation. And so we kind of touched on this a little bit. As the industry is constantly changing, we're constantly having to innovate, we're constantly having to keep up with all of the trends that are happening, and those things can change within a moment's notice, especially from the regulatory side. And so it's really important for the ancillary side to constantly stay on top of those trends. And there's a lot of really great innovation that is happening in this space. I mean, when I joined back years ago, a lot of this stuff didn't exist. And so we're starting to see all of this great innovation come up. We're starting to be like other industries where we have a lot of these businesses that support. And so can you explain how innovation is driving growth within the ancillary side of the cannabis sector? Jack, let's start with you.
First off, innovation is absolutely critical in the ancillary side as we continuously try to add value and put our partners, our customers in the best position to succeed. Constantly the pressures there and the need to innovate and iterate and to deliver the best possible products in the best possible way. But I think in terms of the ancillary market, in terms of what we're, the great companies are trying to do, certainly the company that's either side of me, is really instilling a level of quantitative benchmarking and deep understanding of the niches in which we operate in, whether that be vape or the holistic technical quality of an entire organization, or the post-harvest and curing and mastering of the plant's natural life cycle. really what we're all trying to do is put very tight quantitative metrics and standards around how to consume this, at what point in the life cycle are things ideal. And really what I'm getting at with that is really trying to allow us as an industry to elevate the qualitative standards at which we operate at. And how do we do that at scale, and how do we have consistency at scale? It's with great thoughtful suppliers that are deeply technical in their niches, really putting out products that allow us to meet qualitative standards before that we thought only possible in the smallest, most craft, most niche, most controlled of supply chains. And really, a tremendous opportunity for the cannabis industry is to have consistency and have relationships between brands and customers. And how do we have that? It's with consistency. When I'm in the airport in the morning and I'm getting a McDonald's cheeseburger and I fly all day across the country, and I stop in Miami that night and I get another cheeseburger at the airport, the consistency and taste and the expectation that I have a good idea about what I'm going to receive, that's a brand, and that's a relationship between the consumer and the brand. And particularly in cannabis, ancillary companies that are really specialized in their products and trying to deliver maximum value play a huge part in that.
Right, so what you're really talking about there is making sure you have standardization. And so on the plant touching side of the business, we don't have a lot of standardization, because like what's grown, if you're a brand, you produce in Illinois, you're utilizing Illinois product. When you produce in Maryland, you're using Maryland. And so there's not a lot of standardization that we've seen. And really where the rubber meets the road is making sure that what you get in one state is also what you get in another state. So you were kind of talking about your cheeseburger. That's kind of like that McDonald's concept, where no matter where you go to McDonald's, it's the same cheeseburger every single time. And that's part of their brand equity. And so what you're talking about really on the ancillary side is that we're able to really maintain that brand equity because we're able to scale across the country and really create that value. Now, one of the things you touched on was kind of that quantitative side and really having some of those benchmarks and those KPIs. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think John can also speak really well to this in terms of different wattage and ohms and temperatures for different viscosities and different types of extracts, right? But for our case in particular, really understanding water activity level, understanding post-harvest life cycle, understanding and really being able to educate and create products that are built around the way the industry should work in terms of, for us, again, post-harvest methodology and post-harvest standards, and really taking some of these, qualitative, wide margin of error processes and really putting standards around it with very specific products and procedures really is critical to developing an industry where we can deliver consistent experiences to our customers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Gary, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is don't go in with a pitch book when you're trying to innovate and talk to your customers. I think you have to sit and talk with them because they don't always know what they want. They're in a rock fight every single day trying to live in their market, and they're growing things sometimes that they shouldn't really be growing in that environment, but they have no choice. So when you can partner up with them and provide them some solutions that maybe they wouldn't think about, packaging is a great example, right? Everybody wants certain kind of packaging. At the end of the day, no one shops the shelves anyway, so you can help counsel some of your customers along the way and give them innovative solutions that allow them to leverage certain things and maybe have some packaging that can cross state lines and not have to be, each state has its own individual package. Maybe 80–90% of it fits, and then there's only a little bit of customization. So doing little things like that and listening to where the pain point is, because sometimes innovation could be where to put a drip hole in a grow bag like we produce, where to put a perforation so they can tear it off a little faster. The world that they work in, coming up with a true solution for them as opposed to forcing a solution on them, like an iPhone says, oh, I need the iPhone 16. I didn't really know I needed AI on this, but it keeps changing what I type, but that's fine. We don't need that necessarily at this level. There's still plenty of work to be done if we just listen to our customers and innovate off of that.
So what you're really talking about is helping your customers scale more effectively. How do we take some cost out of that supply chain? How do we make sure that 80–90% can really be shipped across the country and only little nuances need to be changed on them? And so really helping our customers with that pain point of having to do everything individually. How do we make sure we can start scaling? And ancillary is really key to doing that. Any thoughts from you, John?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think exactly what Gary was saying, that we really have to take a consultative approach with clients. And A lot of them don't really understand, especially in the vape space. I mean, that space has been exploding, and we're seeing change happen rapidly. So it used to be, you know, the 510 thread cart was the same thing for years. Nobody really changed. And in the last, you know, 5-10 years, it really has been changing very quickly. And, you know, one unique perspective we have is we do operate in the nicotine space and the hemp space. So we see the trends start in nicotine, then move their way to the hemp space, and then eventually the cannabis space. So we do have a future look into what is actually happening, what the form factors are looking like, what the technology is. And it's super helpful for us and super helpful to our clients to be able to give them that insight, especially when you're dealing with time. It takes us sometimes a year plus to develop a product. So we have to be looking so far in advance to see what that trend's gonna be, so we can get through all of the product testing, get through all of the pieces that make sure that that product is gonna be an incredible product once it hits the market. And that takes time. And so we have to have our magic crystal ball that basically shows us, you know, what that's going to be. And, you know, obviously that doesn't exist. So we are using data that we're getting from the nicotine space to then feed into the hemp space, and then that data from the hemp space to then feed into the cannabis space. And you've seen it with, in nicotine, you know, the palm style devices that fit in your hand. Everybody has one of those. Eventually that came over to the hemp space about 2 years ago. And now in cannabis, you're seeing that come now with a lot of brands dropping, you know, palm style devices now. So we get to see that ahead of time. You know, now it's with screens on the devices and things like that. Eventually, you know, we might have an iPhone vape at one point. Who knows? It just, yeah, that's the one piece that I think really helps our clients, is being able to give them that consultative approach and show them, hey, this is where the industry's going. This is where we suggest you put your investment towards, and it's panned out well.
Okay, so you talked about that crystal ball,
Yeah.
which I know everybody would really love to have that crystal ball. I know I do. All right, so let's, not to put you guys on the spot, but like, let's say you have that crystal ball. You know, what kind of innovation are you seeing in your areas in the near future? What do you think some of those key things are gonna be? John?
I believe, I mean, like I just said about the screen devices, I mean, you know, as funny as it is, we are seeing devices with video games on them, different things like that in the nicotine space. I think it can be a little more gimmicky, but we do see, you know, a lot of that technology coming in, where it's like, if you think about, you know, having your iPhone and you didn't have a battery meter on there, wouldn't that drive you crazy? You have no idea when it's going to run out. So the same things happen in the vape space, that, you know, eventually I do feel like people are going to want a screen on every device because they want to see their battery levels. They want to see different information like that, like Jack was saying earlier, being able to change, you know, your ohms, different things like that, voltage, you know, having that accessibility to be able to update the vape you're using to fit that oil better is, you know, super important, and that's what we're seeing as well. And then just, you know, the different kind of technologies around how it's combusting the oil as well is something that we're working on. And it always ends up starting in the nicotine space and then moving through. And so by the time we're you know, selling in the cannabis space, we've already, you know, vetted this technology for years at that point. And so yeah, that's the main stuff that we're seeing.
Very exciting. Jack?
Continue to see a big move towards smart materials and either products that are used in other agricultural verticals, or seeing products that are kind of tailor engineered to try to account for plant physiology and plant life cycle. I think we're going to see that more and more. I think the kind of era of the Happy Meal style or packaging, where you're getting a toy and it's very novel, and you know the weight of the packaging is in far excess of the actual weight of flour in there. I think you're going to see that continue to move. The way the food industry is, or if you go in a convenience store, you'll see the vast majority of the product in there is flexible packaging. I think the reality is cannabis is not a novelty product. It's a part of everyday life. So I think we're going to continue seeing a movement away from rigid packaging and moving away from some of this gimmicky packaging towards continuously towards tailor engineered, smart, intelligent solutions that are really uniquely designed around what we're really trying to deliver as an industry, and also respecting the actual physiology of the plant.
Awesome. Gary?
I think for us, it's about form factors. You know, it's about trying to get more efficient in the garden. So finding ways to save, whether it's on labor, on the water usage, on the nutrient usage, keeping it simple so that the growers can really have their expertise, which is how to drive that plant, how to manage the plant's growth, and they're not so caught up in just, you know, how to work with the product you sell them. So I think for us, everything we've been rolling out lately was with an eye towards that. Roll it out fast, roll it out at a good price, and make it easy to use. And then the growers have more latitude to then do the things they do well.
Sorry, just to add something that I hear from some of your colleagues that I love, Gary, is the facilities that focus on cost of production and not yield per light or square footage.
I mean, yield is great, if you're like the only supplier in the market. Markets have a lot of biomass floating around. So at this point, you want predictable yields, but it's not just I need a maximum yields per square foot. It should be what am I growing? What's the terpene profile? Yeah, THC is still important, but we're seeing more and more markets are opening up to the rest of the plant as they should have, as they've been doing in the West Coast for quite a long time. So I think they are being able to help the growers drive to that and not just say, use my product, you'll get more flower. Well, I've already got too much. I don't know, I need more. I just need it to be better and different. So I think you're absolutely right.
Wonderful. All right, let's get to topic 3. This is one of my favorite parts of the panel, which is investing in the space. And so we have been here at Benzinga for the past couple of days, and a lot of the topics have been about how do we bring more investment into the cannabis space. And we have seen that a lot of the investment in the space is now debt. I think I heard something along the lines of like 99% of the investment in the space is debt. And that a lot of investors are kind of really holding to see what happens within the cannabis space. What's great about the ancillary side is we're kind of arm's length to the cannabis space. So there's really a lot of opportunity there for investment because we are not plant touching operations. So Gary, let's talk about this. What advice would you give to investors looking to get involved in the cannabis industry but want to avoid the heavy regulatory hurdles that we see?
I mean, I've been surprised that investors haven't been a little bit more tuned in to ancillaries in general. If you're curious about the space, or even if you've invested in the space in plant touching operations, we've all been to the panels, we've heard the things they look for and the issues that everyone's still dealing with, the 280E, the lack of efficiency in some of these grows. And then you take a look and you see, shops like ours here where we're just about profitable. We can expand over state lines. We have the ability to operate like a true business might and create some value. Now, maybe the returns don't look quite as sexy, but when I look at all the plant touching operations, the only thing sexy about the returns is how they look on a piece of paper, because I don't know that anyone's hit them yet or actually been able to tap out and have that moment. So I think being able to support the market and then get a bird's eye view. If regulations do change, whether it's rescheduling or complete legalization, working with an ancillary gives you a bird's eye view on who pays their bills, who runs their business as well, who actually has a good platform that they're going to expand, and they're going to be a winner in the post-legalization world. So it's a great way to get in. Most of these companies don't need a big number. They probably only need hundreds of thousands of dollars to really achieve the scale they need. They don't need 2, 3, 4 million. They don't have to go buy someplace to expand and go into. They can just grow organically with minimal CapEx. So I think it's a really good opportunity. I think more folks should be looking at that. And lending, I get it. I mean, we've all had to run to wherever the money is, right? We ran to Canada first, then we did sale leasebacks, which in just about any other industry is the last thing you want to do. Now we take loans out. So you kind of see how the story's writing itself. I think it's time to start to get regular money coming in to support this part of the industry, because when the rest turns, this will be your bird's eye view.
Agreed. Jack, any thoughts from you?
I agree. I think it is surprising that the ancillary realm is often ignored, and it's surprising because there's a lot of clues in terms of our business and the verticals we operate in, either in mainstream ag or in nicotine or in some of the alcohol CPG for us to look to and kind of model and understand this market and understand the businesses. But the ancillary companies and the plant touching companies, I think there's a myriad of opportunities on both sides of that to really have an enduring brands and enduring players. So I would summarize by saying, software has certainly gotten a lot of attention, but some of these ancillary companies, sneakily, I would say, are some of the most global, most, if you know what you're looking for, most visible and most widely used products in the space on either the consumer end or the production end. So really, I think a lot of the next wave of cannabis before we have major financing and banking reform will be focused on the ancillary space, ancillary roll-ups, and really companies trying to maximize leverage in the space, both across the category and in other categories, whether that might be mainstream ag or nicotine vapes, et cetera.
Wonderful. Any thoughts from you, John?
Yeah, I mean, like Jack said, yeah, we are a very global business on this side, and ancillary does have that unique advantage that cannabis plant touching doesn't, and it's tough when you look at it and you say, hey, like, cannabis money gets dried up very quickly, it feels like. I was with a company in California called Herbal, and I remember at the end, couldn't get money, and they ended up going under because of that. And, those pieces, it's a lot more sound on this side of the business where, especially in vape, we have the nicotine space as well, which is very predictable. Cannabis is a little more challenging there where, forecasting is, at times not the best, but we're able to do a well enough job that we could, be pretty predictable on, what our revenue is going to be. And it's a lot more safe space as far as investment, I would say.
And I would just add, too, multiple shots on net in the spirit of the NHL playoffs. We're not limited to one market. It's basically all markets. It's Canada, it's Puerto Rico, it's wherever there is cannabis. And there's a number of us who can also go play in the regular space too, in big ag or whatever else not. A lot of our products can be used outside of cannabis, which again, if you're an investor, these are the kinds of things you want to hear normally. You don't want to be stuck into one pigeonhole. So good opportunities out there.
Awesome. So we're getting to the end of our panel. And so what I've gotten from this is ancillary is a really great opportunity for the cannabis space. You can scale across multiple markets. They're innovating at a very quick pace. They're not subject to the same regulatory hurdles that our plant-touching operations are subject to. And it's a great investment opportunity because not only can these companies work within the cannabis space, a lot of them can work in other spaces as well. So this is a great way to get involved in cannabis, but be able to kind of keep that arm's length mentality. So I'd love to thank our panelists. Let's give it up for them today. And thanks to all of you for paying attention. And we are between you and lunch, so we will leave it at that. Thank you so much.